The great hall of the Galactic Concord stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Its walls were made of living crystal that sang softly when the light touched them. 12 thrones rose from the floor, each one shaped for a different species. Each one occupied by beings who had ruled the stars for 60,000 years. Ambassador Chen Wei stood alone in the center of the hall. She was small compared to the creatures around her. Her black hair was tied back in a simple knot, and her uniform was plain gray. But her eyes were steady, and her voice did not shake when she spoke. "You cannot do this," she said. 17 billion people. You are asking us to abandon everything we have built. High Arbiter Velketh leaned forward on its throne. It was a being made of living crystal, like the walls around them, but its body was dark purple and filled with swirling lights. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "We are not asking," Velketh said. "We are telling. Humanity has been judged. You are guilty of technological theft. You are guilty of unauthorized expansion. You are guilty of breeding beyond your assigned limits. And most importantly, you are guilty of refusing to accept your place in the natural order." Chen Wei felt her hands curl into fists at her sides. She had known this day was coming. For 47 years, humanity had tried to fit into the Concord system. They had followed the rules. They had asked permission. They had bowed and scraped and smiled, and it had never been enough. The truth was simple. The elder species did not hate humanity. They feared them. In less than 50 years, humans had spread across 200 worlds. Their population had grown from 2 billion to 17 billion. They had looked at Concord technology and figured out how it worked, sometimes in days, sometimes in hours. They learned too fast. They changed too quickly. They asked too many questions. Where will we go? Chen Wei asked. Another member of the council spoke. This was Thresha, a creature that looked like a cloud of golden smoke. Its voice was soft and musical. "The Sagittarius Fringe," Thresha said. "Beyond the boundary. There are worlds there that can support life. You will be given ships to transport your population. You will have 90 days. Chen Wei did the math in her head. 90 days to move 17 billion people across half the galaxy. It was technically possible, but only barely. Thousands would die. Maybe millions. The council knew this. They did not care. "And if we refuse?" Chen Wei asked. Velketh's body flashed with cold blue light. "Then you will be removed by force. Your colonies will be sterilized. Your ships will be destroyed. Your species will end." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, because that is exactly what they were. Chen Wei looked around the great hall. She looked at the 12 thrones and the 12 ancient species that sat upon them. Some of them would not meet her eyes. Others stared at her with expressions she could not read. But none of them spoke against the judgment. She had hoped that someone would. She had hoped that the friendships humanity had built, the trade deals they had signed, the art and music and stories they had shared, would mean something. But in the end, it meant nothing. The elder species had made their decision long before this trial began. The trial was just a show, a performance to make the murder of a civilization look like justice. Chen Wei straightened her spine. She would not beg. She would not cry. She would give them nothing. "I want to say something," she said. "For the record. So that history will remember." Velketh waved one crystalline hand. "Speak." Chen Wei took a deep breath. She thought about her children, who were waiting on a station 3 systems away. She thought about her parents, who had been among the first humans to leave Earth. She thought about all the generations that would come after her, growing up on strange worlds at the edge of nowhere. "You think you are protecting yourselves," she said. "You think that by sending us away, you will be safe. But you are making a mistake. The worst mistake your Concorde has ever made. Thresher made a sound that might have been laughter. You threaten us? You, with your primitive ships and your short lives? I am not threatening you, Chunwei said. I am warning you. You have ruled this galaxy for 60,000 years. Do you know why? Because nothing challenged you. Nothing pushed you. Nothing forced you to grow or change or become better than you were. She pointed at the empty space around her. You have become comfortable. You have become slow. You have forgotten what it means to struggle, to fight, to survive against the odds. And someday, something will come that you cannot defeat with your old weapons and your old ways. And when that day comes, you will wish that you had kept us as friends instead of casting us out as enemies. Valkith rose from its throne. Its body blazed with angry red light. Enough, it said. You have been judged. The sentence will be carried out. Remove her. Guards moved toward Chen Wei. They were Krethali, massive beings with 4 arms and skin like stone. They grabbed her roughly and began to drag her toward the doors. Chen Wei did not struggle. But as she passed beneath the thrones of the council, she spoke one last time. We will remember this, she said. Her voice was calm and cold. We always do. Then the doors closed behind her, and the great hall was silent. On the thrones, the elder species looked at each other. Some of them felt a strange unease, a shadow of doubt that they could not explain. But they pushed it aside. What could primitives possibly do? They were being sent to the edge of the galaxy, to marginal worlds with thin atmospheres and poisonous soil. They would be lucky to survive at all. In 1,000 years. The Concorde would probably send a survey team to see if any humans were left. They would find ruins and bones, and that would be the end of it. Or so they believed, because the elder species had made a mistake. They had judged humanity by what they were. They had not considered what humanity might become. On the transport ship that carried her away from the Great Hall, Chen Wei sat in a small cabin and stared out at the stars. Her hands were shaking now. Her eyes were wet with tears she had refused to shed in front of her enemies. But beneath the grief and the anger, something else was growing. Something hard and bright and dangerous. Humanity had been cast out. They had been called vermin and criminals and threats to galactic peace. They had been sent to die on the edge of nowhere. But they were not dead yet. And Chen Wei knew her species. She knew what they could do when they had no other choice. The Concorde had wanted to bury humanity in the darkness. Instead, they had planted a seed. And seeds, given time, can grow into something that shakes the very foundations of the world. 200 years had passed since the expulsion, Commander. Yuki Tanaka stood on a balcony overlooking the shipyards of New Prometheus. The planet below her had once been a hellscape of acid rain and volcanic storms. Now it was covered with cities and farms and forests that stretched to every horizon. The transformation had taken only 80 years. Beautiful, isn't it? Said a voice behind her. YUK. I turned to see Admiral Marcus Cole walking toward her. He was a tall man with dark skin and gray hair cut short. A long scar ran down the left side of his face, a souvenir from the Forge Wars 30 years ago. It's hard to believe this used to be a death world, Yuki said. My grandmother told me stories about the early days. They had to wear full environment suits just to step outside. Marcus nodded. My grandfather was on the first terraforming crew. Half of them died in the first year. Acid burns, equipment failures, native bacteria that ate through their filters. He smiled grimly, but they kept going. What choice did they have? That was the truth of the fringe years. Humanity had not been given good worlds. They had been given the leftovers, the planets that the Concorde considered worthless. Acid worlds, ice worlds, desert worlds with temperatures that could cook a person in minutes. The Concorde had expected humanity to die. Instead, humanity had learned to survive. And then they had learned to thrive. I looked out at the shipyards. Hundreds of vessels floated in orbital docks, their hulls gleaming in the light of new Prometheus's sun. These were not the primitive ships humanity had arrived with 2 centuries ago. These were something entirely new. The full drive tests? She asked. Successful, Marcus said. The newest models can cross 50 light years in under a minute. That's 10 times faster than Concorde hyperspace technology. Yuki let out a slow breath. The full drive had been humanity's first great breakthrough. The Concorde used hyperspace lanes, fixed corridors through higher dimensions that connected their systems. But the hyperspace lanes took centuries to establish and could be blocked or destroyed. The full drive was different. It crumpled space itself, bringing 2 distant points together like folding a piece of paper. It required enormous energy, but humanity had solved that problem too. 0-point reactors? Yuki asked. Standard on all new vessels, Marcus confirmed. Infinite clean energy from the quantum vacuum. The science team says we could power a planet with a reactor the size of a house. Yuki shook her head in wonder. When humanity had arrived in the fringe, they had been centuries behind the Concorde in technology. Now, in many ways, they were centuries ahead. Desperation was a powerful teacher. There's something else, Marcus said. His voice had grown serious. Something the scout teams found. Yuki felt a chill run down her spine. For decades, humanity had been sending small ships past the boundary, slipping into Concorde space to watch and listen and learn. It was dangerous work. If they were caught, the Concorde would use it as an excuse to finish what they had started 2 centuries ago. But the information was too valuable to ignore. What did they find? Yuki asked. Marcus pulled out a small device and projected a holographic image into the air between them. It showed a star map of the Concorde's territory, hundreds of systems connected by glowing hyperspace lanes. The Concorde is dying, Marcus said. I stared at him. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. Their population has been declining for 10,000 years. Their technology hasn't advanced in twice that long. Their culture has become completely static. The same laws, the same customs, the same everything for longer than human civilization has existed. He zoomed in on several systems. These colonies haven't grown in 5,000 years. These shipyards are still building the exact same designs they built when they exiled us. Their people are living the same lives their ancestors lived countless generations ago. Yuki understood what he was saying. The Concorde had become frozen. They had achieved what they considered perfection, and then they had stopped. No more growth. No more change. No more evolution. They're dying of old age, she said softly. As a civilization, Marcus nodded. They cast us out because we were too chaotic, too unpredictable, too alive. But that chaos, that unpredictability, that life is what keeps a species going. Without it, you just slowly fade away. For a moment, Yuki almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Then she remembered the expulsion. She remembered the millions who had died during the forced migration. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told about the early days, about the starvation and the disease and the endless struggle to survive on worlds that wanted to kill them. The Concorde had done that to humanity. They did not deserve sympathy. There's more, Marcus said. His voice had dropped to barely a whisper. Something else is coming. He changed a holographic display. Now it showed the edge of the galaxy, far beyond even the fringe, where the stars grew thin and the darkness of intergalactic space began. Our deep space sensors picked this up 6 months ago, Marcus said. We've been tracking it ever since. Yuki saw shapes moving in the darkness. Thousands of shapes, millions, a vast swarm of something that glinted with metallic light. "What is it?" she asked. "We don't know exactly. The best guess is that it's some kind of machine ecology. Self-replicating systems that have been traveling through the void between galaxies for millions of years, maybe billions. They consume stars for energy and break down planets for raw materials." Marcus looked at Yuki with eyes that held no fear, only grim determination. "They're heading straight for the Milky Way. At their current speed, they'll reach Concord space in about 50 years. And based on what our scouts have seen, the Concord has no idea they're coming." Yuki stared at the swarm of machines in the hologram. There were so many of them. An endless tide of hungry metal, coming to devour everything in its path. "What do we do?" she asked. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he turned off the hologram and looked out at the shipyards, at the gleaming fleet that humanity had built from nothing. "That's the question, isn't it?" he said. "The Concord kicked us out. They called us animals. They sent us here to die. And now something is coming that might actually kill them." He paused. "Part of me says we should let it happen. Let them burn for what they did to us. And the other part?" Yuki asked. Marcus smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was something warm in it. "The other part remembers who we are. What we've always been, even when we were killing each other back on Earth. We're the species that runs toward danger instead of away from it. The species that pulls enemies out of burning buildings. The species that can't seem to stop hoping, no matter how many times hope has failed us." He turned to face Yuki directly. "Start preparing the fleet," he said. "Whatever we decide, we need to be ready. The storm is coming, and humanity will face it standing up." The machines came out of the darkness like a plague of metal locusts. The Concord called them the Karath, a word from an ancient language that meant the endless hunger. They were not alive in any way that organic beings understood. They did not think or feel or dream. They simply consumed. The first system to fall was Varath Prime, home to 3 billion members of the Thresha species. The golden smoke beings had lived there for 20,000 years, building cities that floated in the clouds of their gas giant home. The Karath swarm arrived without warning. One moment the sky was empty. The next moment it was filled with machines the size of mountains, their surfaces covered with harvesting equipment and processing plants. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They did not even acknowledge that the Thresha existed. They simply began to eat. The Concord fleet arrived 3 days later. 200 warships, each one a mile long, armed with weapons that could crack planets. They were the pride of the elder species, unchanged in design for 12,000 years because they had never needed to change. The battle lasted less than an hour. High Arbiter Velkith watched the recordings from the safety of the Concord capital. Its crystalline body flickered with colors it had no names for, emotions it had never been designed to feel. Fear, confusion, despair. The Concord weapons had barely scratched the Karath machines. Their shields absorbed energy attacks. Their armor shrugged off kinetic impacts. And for every machine destroyed, 10 more emerged from the processing plants to take its place. The swarm had consumed Varath Prime in less than a week. The star itself was now surrounded by a shell of harvesting stations, drinking its energy like water. 3 billion Thresha were gone. Not dead, exactly. The Karath did not kill. They simply dismantled everything in their path, converting matter into more machines, more harvesters, more of themselves. "What do we do?" asked one of the council members. It was Krethal, the stone-skinned species that had once dragged Ambassador Chen Wei from the Great Hall. Now its voice trembled with something close to panic. Velkith did not answer, because it did not know. For 60,000 years, the Concord had faced no real threats. Minor conflicts between species. Occasional rebellions that were crushed with ease. Nothing that challenged their supremacy. Nothing that forced them to adapt or evolve. Now they faced something that did not care about their supremacy. Something that had been perfecting itself for 1 billion years, crossing the void between galaxies, consuming everything in its path. And the Concorde had no answer. On the human side of the boundary, the Senate met in emergency session. Admiral Marcus Cole stood before the assembled representatives, his scarred face grim. Behind him, holographic displays showed the Kareth advance. 4 systems had fallen now. 2 more were under attack. The swarm was growing larger with every world it consumed. "We have a choice to make," Marcus said. "The Concorde that exiled us is dying. Within 10 years, maybe less, the Kareth will reach their core worlds. Within 20 years, they will reach the boundary. And then they will come for us." The Senate chamber erupted in shouting. Some demanded that humanity stay hidden, let the Concorde fall, and prepare their own defenses. Others argued for striking now, while the Concorde was distracted, taking their territory before the Kareth could consume it. A third group said something different. Senator Amara Okonkwo rose from her seat. She was old now, nearly 90, but her voice was still strong. "I remember the expulsion," she said. "I was a child when the ships came to take us away. I remember my mother crying as we left our home. I remember the years in the fringe, the hunger and the fear and the death." The chamber fell silent. "I have every reason to hate the Concorde," Amara continued. "Every reason to want them to burn. But hatred is a poison. It eats you from the inside. And revenge is a trap. It turns you into the thing you hate." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every senator. "We've spent 200 years becoming something new, something better. We have built technologies they never dreamed of. We have created a civilization that the Concorde said was impossible. And now we have a choice. Do we become like them? Cold and cruel and selfish? Or do we prove that we were always better than they believed?" Admiral Cole stepped forward. "Senator Okonkwo is right," he said. "We could let them die. God knows they earned it. But that's not who we are. That's not who we've ever been." He pointed at the holographic display, at the spreading darkness of the Kareth swarm. "Those machines don't care about our old grudges. They don't care about borders or politics or revenge. They're coming for everyone, Concorde and human alike. The only question is whether we face them together or die separately." The vote took 3 hours. It was the closest vote in Senate history. In the end, humanity chose to help. Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of the HSS Resolution as the human fleet prepared to cross the boundary. 3,000 ships, each one equipped with full drives and zero-point reactors, armed with weapons the Concorde had never seen. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Concorde capital. It's High Arbiter Velkith." Marcus felt a cold smile cross his face. "Put it through." The crystalline form of Velkith appeared on the main screen. It looked different than Marcus remembered from the historical recordings. Smaller, somehow. Dimmer. "Human vessel," Velkith said. "You are approaching the boundary. This is forbiddance. Turn back immediately or face destruction." Marcus laughed. He couldn't help it. "Face destruction?" he said. "From what? Your fleet is gone. Your worlds are falling. You couldn't destroy a transport shuttle right now, let alone 3,000 warships." Velkith's body flickered with angry light. "You dare mock us? We are the Concorde. We have ruled this galaxy for 60,000 years. You ruled a galaxy that didn't fight back," Marcus said. "That's over now." He leaned forward in his chair. "We're coming through the boundary, Velkith. Not to conquer. Not to take revenge. We're coming to save your people, whether you want us to or not." The transmission ended. Marcus looked at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting. "All ships," he said. "Engage full drives. Let's show them what humanity can do." 3,000 ships vanished in a flash of twisted light. The boundary, which had held humanity prisoner for 2 centuries, meant nothing to vessels that could fold space itself. The war for the galaxy had begun. The human fleet arrived at Kreth, all prime, in the middle of a massacre. The stone-skinned species had been among the proudest members of the Concord. Their warriors had once dragged Ambassador Chen Wei from the Great Hall. Their leaders had voted enthusiastically for humanity's exile. Now their homeworld was burning. Karath harvesters filled the sky like metal clouds. The planet's surface was already scarred with massive gouges where the machines had begun their consumption. Refugee ships were trying to escape, but the Karath were faster. One by one, the fleeing vessels were caught and dismantled. Admiral Marcus Cole looked at the tactical display and made his decision in less than a second. "All ships, engage," he ordered. "Priority targets are the harvesters threatening civilian vessels. Get those refugees clear." The human fleet exploded into action. Full drives let them appear anywhere on the battlefield in an instant. One moment, a Kareth harvester would be closing on a refugee ship. The next moment, a human destroyer would materialize beside it, weapons already firing. The Concord had never seen anything like it. Their ships moved in straight lines, using hyperspace lanes that took hours to traverse. Human ships danced through space like ghosts, appearing and disappearing, striking from impossible angles, and the weapons were something else entirely. Human engineers had spent 2 centuries studying physics without the Concord's restrictions. They had discovered principles the elder species had forbidden themselves from exploring. The plasma cannons on human ships burned at temperatures that should have been impossible. The kinetic rounds traveled at speeds that broke the laws the Concord thought were universal. The Kareth machines began to fall, not easily, not quickly. Each harvester was the size of a mountain, armored with materials that had been refined over 1 billion years of evolution. They fell nonetheless, torn apart by weapons that should not have existed. And while the warships fought, human transports dove through the chaos to reach the refugee vessels. They locked onto disabled ships and used full drives to carry them to safety, jumping dozens of light years in a single instant. On the surface of Krethel Prime, human marines in powered armor held evacuation points against waves of smaller Karath machines. They fought with weapons that fired bolts of compressed gravity, crushing the machines into spheres of twisted metal. Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka led a squad through the ruins of a Kreth L city. The stone buildings had been torn apart by Karath harvesters, but survivors were still hiding in the rubble. "Contact," said one of her soldiers. "Karath drones, 200 meters." Yuki raised her weapon. The drones were small, only the size of dogs, but they were fast, and their cutting tools could slice through standard armor in seconds. "Hold the line," she ordered. "Civilians are still evacuating." The squad opened fire. Gravity bolts tore through the drone swarm, but more kept coming. There were always more. A massive Krethel emerged from a collapsed building behind them. It was wounded, one of its 4 arms hanging limp, its stone skin cracked and bleeding. It stared at the human soldiers with eyes full of confusion. "Why?" it asked. Its voice was deep and rough. "Why are you here? We cast you out. We wanted you dead." Yuki kept firing at the drones. "Yeah, we remember. Then why?" A drone got close enough to slash at Yuki's armor. She crushed it with her armored fist and kept shooting. "Because someone has to be the good guys," she said. "Transport's landing in 2 minutes. Get your people to the evacuation point." The Krethel stared at her for a long moment. Then it turned and began gathering survivors, herding them toward the landing zone with its remaining arms down in orbit. The battle raged on. Admiral Cole's flagship, the HSS Resolution, had taken up position near the heart of the Karath swarm. It was a massive vessel, nearly 2 miles long, built to be the command center for the entire human fleet, and it was surrounded. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, reported his damage control officer. "We've lost 30% of our point defense grid." "Keep firing," Cole ordered. "We're the biggest target here. Every Karath machine focused on us is one that isn't killing civilians." It was a calculated sacrifice. The resolution was tough enough to survive punishment that would have destroyed any Concorde vessel. And every second it held the Karath's attention. More refugees escaped. On the main screen, Cole saw a transmission request from the planet's surface. He accepted it. The face that appeared was crystalline, flickering with dim light. "High Arbiter Velkith." "Human Admiral," Velkith said. Its voice was strange, filled with emotions Cole had never heard from a Concorde leader. "Why are you doing this?" "Your ship is dying. Your soldiers are dying. For us. For the species that tried to destroy you." Cole watched another section of his hull breach. Another dozen of his crew gone. "You want to know why?" he said. "Because 200 years ago, you made a mistake. You looked at humanity and saw vermin. Pests to be exterminated. But you didn't see what we really are. And what is that?" Cole smiled. It was the smile of a man who had made peace with death long ago. "We're the species that can't stop caring. Even when it hurts. Even when it's stupid. Even when every logical argument says we should let you burn." He shrugged. "It's a weakness, maybe. But it's also the thing that makes us human." Velkith was silent for a long moment. Its crystalline body flickered through colors that had no names. "I was there," it said finally. "At the tribunal. When Ambassador Chen Wei stood before us. I voted for the expulsion. I called your species a contamination." "I know," Cole said. "I was wrong." The words hung in the air like something fragile and precious. "Yeah," Cole said. "You were." The Battle of Krethel Prime lasted for 18 hours. When it was over, the human fleet had lost 400 ships and nearly 50,000 soldiers. But they had saved 11 billion Krethel civilians, 11 billion lives, rescued by the species they had once tried to murder. In the days that followed, the news spread across what remained of the Concorde. Humans were fighting the Karath. Humans were evacuating civilians. Humans were dying to protect species that had treated them like animals. No one could understand it. The elder species had lived by a simple philosophy for 60,000 years. The strong dominated the weak. And mercy was a sign of foolishness. Humanity was rewriting that philosophy with blood and fire. And somewhere in the chaos, the survivors of the Concorde began to feel something they had forgotten existed. Something that their ancient, calcified civilization had abandoned long ago. They began to feel hope. The war lasted 11 years. 11 years of blood and fire and sacrifice. 11 years of human ships folding across the galaxy, striking at Karath swarms, evacuating civilians, holding lines that could not be held. 11 years of dying for species that had once wanted humanity extinct. And in the end, it was not weapons that saved the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Chun was the great-great-granddaughter of Ambassador Chen Wei, the woman who had been dragged from the Concorde's Great Hall 2 centuries ago. She had inherited her ancestors' stubbornness, her fierce intelligence, and her refusal to accept that any problem was unsolvable. For 3 years, while the war raged around her, Sarah had been studying captured Karath machines in a secret laboratory on the edge of human space. She had taken them apart, analyzed their programming, mapped their communication networks, and she had discovered something remarkable. The Karath were not mindless. They were not simply machines following ancient programming. They were a civilization, 1 billion years old, that had evolved beyond the need for individual consciousness. They were a single vast mind, spread across millions of bodies, driven by a purpose that had been set so long ago that even the Korath themselves had forgotten its origin. They consumed not out of malice, but out of instinct. Like a river flowing downhill, like a fire spreading through dry wood. They did what they did because that was what they were. Sarah figured out how to talk to them. It took another 2 years to refine the communication system. Another year to negotiate. The Korath did not understand concepts like mercy or compassion, but they understood efficiency. They understood purpose. Sarah offered them something better than the Milky Way. The galactic core was rich with resources that the organic species could never use. Stars too hot for habitable planets. Black holes that could power the Korath's consumption for billions of years. A feast beyond anything the outer galaxy could offer. It was not a victory. It was not a defeat. It was a redirection. The Korath swarm turned inward toward the core and left the organic species behind. The war was over, but the galaxy had been transformed. The Concord, as it had existed for 60,000 years, was gone. Half of the elder species had been devastated, their populations scattered across refugee worlds. Their ancient institutions had collapsed. Their carefully maintained stagnation had been shattered beyond repair. What rose from the ashes was something new. Admiral Marcus Cole stood at a podium on Station Unity, a massive structure that had been built where the boundary once stood. He was old now, his hair white, his body bent by age and old wounds. But his voice was still strong. Before him sat the first assembly of the Terran Concord. Humans in Krethel, Thresha, and a dozen other species, survivors all. They had come together not because of ancient treaties or threats of force, but because they chose to. They asked us, during the war, why we helped them, Cole said. Why we bled for species that had treated us like animals. He looked out at the gathered delegates. The answer is simple. Cruelty is easy. Hatred is easy. Any species can manage that. He straightened, and for a moment, the years seemed to fall away. But choosing compassion when you have every reason for revenge. Choosing to build when destruction would be justified. That's hard. That takes everything you have. That's what makes us human. Not our DNA, not our homeworld. Our choice to be better than our worst impulses. In the crowd, Velkith listened. The High Arbiter had survived the war, though it was diminished now, its crystalline body cracked and dim. It had watched humanity for 11 years. It had seen them die by the millions for species that had wronged them. It had tried to understand, and failed. Until now. Velkith had measured humanity twice. Once, 200 years ago, when it had found them wanting and voted for their exile. Once, 200 years ago, when it had found them wanted and years ago. Once 200 years for their exile. Once during the war, when it had seen something it could not explain. Now, it measured them a third time. And finally, it understood. Humanity was not special because of their technology. They were not special because of their adaptability or their creativity or their stubbornness. Those things could be replicated, given enough time. What made humanity special was something simpler and infinitely more rare. They hoped. Even when hope was foolish. Even when hope was painful. Even when hope meant dying for people who hated you. Humans clung to the belief that tomorrow could be better than today, that enemies could become friends, that the darkness could be pushed back if you just refused to give up. The Concord had forgotten how to hope. They had achieved what they considered perfection and then stopped, frozen in amber, slowly dying of their own stagnation. Humanity had reminded them what it meant to be alive. After the assembly, Yuki Tanaka found Velkith standing at a window, looking out at the stars. "High Arbiter," she said. "The Council is asking for you." Velkith did not turn. "I am no longer High Arbiter," That title belongs to a government that no longer exists. Yuki stood beside the ancient being. She was older now too, gray streaking her black hair, lines carved into her face by years of war. But her eyes were still fierce. "What will you do now?" she asked. Velketh was silent for a long moment. Then its body flickered with colors that Yuki had never seen before. Soft colors. Warm colors. "I will learn," it said. "For 60,000 years, I believed that strength meant dominance. That power meant control. That civilization meant unchanging perfection." It turned to look at Yuki. "You have shown me that I was wrong. All of us were wrong. And now? Now I will try to understand what it means to hope, what it means to change, what it means to be truly alive." Velketh's voice was soft. "It will not be easy. I am very old, and old habits are difficult to break. But I will try." Yuki smiled. "That's all any of us can do." Outside the window, the galaxy stretched away into infinity. Billions of stars, billions of worlds, billions of stories waiting to be written. The Karath were gone, consuming the core, no longer a threat. The old Concord was gone, its rigid structures dissolved into memory. What remained was possibility. In the assembly hall, the delegates were arguing about the future. What laws would govern them? What principles would guide them? How would they rebuild what had been lost? The arguments would continue for years, maybe for centuries. There would be disagreements and conflicts and failures along the way, but they were arguing together. Human and alien, former enemy and former victim, all of them reaching towards something better than what had come before. Ambassador Chen Wei had promised the Concord that humanity would remember. She had been right. Humanity remembered everything. The exile, the suffering, the deaths. But they also remembered something else. Something that their ancestors had learned a long time ago. In the caves and forests of a small blue planet at the edge of nowhere. The darkness is always there. The cold is always waiting. But if you stand together, if you keep the fire burning, if you never stop hoping, you can push the darkness back. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not technology. Not weapons. Not revenge. Hope, and hope, unlike empires, never dies.